by ITS. ITS Central Library is in a 6-story building, with total building area 9,000 meters square. This library, more than 121,000 printed textbooks, more than 10,000 e-books, 10,000 audio-visual data, and 18,000 digital library collections. Besides providing students with the books, the library also provides students with comfort study area, like discussion area, hotspot cafe, computer rent, multi-purposes room, and Indonesia Development Information Services, which connect to the World Bank database. Research and innovation at ITS are geared towards addressing global challenges. Therefore, creative inventions are increasingly being produced by ITS researchers.
Yang satu alumni, yang satu untuk masyarakat. Untuk masyarakat, ya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this lecture series on SDGs today, Tuesday, 1 December 2020. I'm NGU from ITS Global Engagement and will be a master of ceremony this afternoon. Thank you for joining our GLS today. Before we start our agenda, let me inform you about the webinar protocol. First, please adjust your name or ID screen using format university_name. Second, during the lecture, please turn on mute mode and only turn on the audio when the moderator gives the chance. Third, please fill your attendance at bit.ly/attendance_GLS SDGs. Our committee also sent the attendance link in the Zoom chat room. Fourth, participants who wish to ask questions during the question and answer session, please send your question to intip.in/Q&A GLS SDGs. The link for questions listed in the chat room too. Or you can ask directly by using the raise hand feature. Ladies and gentlemen, committed to strengthen international partnership and to provide a world-class environment, Institute of Technology 10 November, Indonesia is inviting global students and young researchers to enjoy world-class lecture delivered by World's Best Lecture through guest lecture series on UN Sustainable Development Goals. Today's theme is Development or Increasing Inequalities in the 21st Century, the words of Letters and Snake, which will be delivered our speaker, Dr. Muhammad Sikandar Khan from Institute of Management Sciences, Peshawar, Pakistan. The lecture will be moderated by Dr. Arfan Fahmi, Bachelor of Arts, Master of Education from ITS. Welcome, Mr. Khan and Dr. Arfan. Okay. Before we proceed to the next agenda, allow me to deliver our schedule today as follows. First, opening, second lecture, third Q&A session, fourth certificate awarding, and the last is closing. Before we go to the next agenda, let me introduce our moderator today with the name Dr. Arfan Fahmi, Bachelor of Arts, Master of Education. He got the PhD and Master in English Education at State University Malang and got the Bachelor in English Language and Literature at Erlangga University, Surabaya. Some expertises of Dr. Arfan are English for specific purposes, blended learning, learning environment, learning motivation, curriculum, and instruction. Mr. Arfan also have been in collaboration with University Malaysia Perlis. That is a short profile about Dr. Arfan. Without further ado, let's proceed to the main agenda. To Dr. Arfan, time is yours.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It's great honor for us today to have Mr. Khan to be our guest speaker today in a very tempting topics. Yeah, we are going to develop or even we create inequality. That must be very interesting topic. Before I proceed, let me introduce to you Mr. Khan. Yeah, Dr. Khan is a full-time teacher of the Institute of Management Sciences, Hyderabad, Peshawar, Pakistan since 2007. He is also the coordinator of academic linkage and exchange program since May 2017. He finished a BA in economics, law, and English. Master have 3 masters here: international relations, University of Peshawar; development studies, University of Manchester; and history, University of Peshawar. His professional career includes full-time teaching at the Institute of Learning and Motivations, Peshawar, and then he also gained full-time teaching on Iqra University, Istanbul, from January 2006 to January 2008, and then he also got a chance to have 3 months teaching at Mughla Siki Kashman University, Turkey, from September to December 2015. Research interests, if interested in education, research, and consultancy special. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, join me to welcome Mr. Khan. Floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello everyone and assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Dr. Fahmi, and I am also thankful to ITS by providing me this opportunity to deliver this talk or lecture to your students and to your faculty. And I hope that we have a good interactive session, which is a kind of an opportunity for me to also learn from you and to share my understanding and my views regarding this topic, which we would be discussing today. So without further ado, I would start my talk, which is again a very debatable topic. And well, not only this topic, but I believe in social sciences, we have different perspectives and we have different angles to look at a particular issue. And all these different angles could be, correct and could be wrong as well. Today's talk, which is part of the Sustainable Development Goal number 10, which actually talks about inequality within and among countries. And we would also, if we get a time, we can have a discussion on the whole discourse of development, that what this discourse have achieved so far, and whether it has increased more inequality. And that's why, as you can see, the topic is about development. So is development increasing inequalities in the current century or in this globalized 21st century? And I've given the subtitle, The World of Ladders and Snakes, where you can see the picture also, where there are threats and there are also opportunities. So I think the whole globalization phenomenon is full of threats and also full of opportunities. And this would be our main discussion in our today's class. Let me go to the second slide, which is mostly about the topic or the questions which we would be discussing. First, I would quickly go through the definition or the understanding of globalization. So we would be covering this, what is globalization. One thing I need to clarify it, that my lecture would be more of an academic nature. It would be, kind of discussing theories and discussions. So it would be less a talk, rather more than, an academic lecture. So the first would be what is globalization? And then the second question, which we would look at how globalization affects inequality and world order, the present day world order. And we would also discuss three different accounts or three different schools of thought. The neoliberal school, then the radical, and in between these two is the transformationalist. So we would be quickly discussing those three. It's different perspectives of different people, how they look at one particular issue with different angles. So we would be looking at the new liberals, the radicals, and the transformationalists. And then we would particularly emphasize over the transformationalists, which provide a rather maybe better explanation for global change than the other two accounts, the radicals or the new liberals. Maybe it's a kind of a more realistic approach or a rather new approach, or maybe not, an extremist approach, but in between these two, the new liberals and the radicals. And then another very important question, which we would be discussing, is to how to manage globalization. Globalization is rampant, right? And it needs to be controlled. And what are actually the policies, right, which we need to adopt, how to regulate or how to manage globalization? So one is the regulation. Then it's the regionalism, which is also somehow, a hindrance toward the globalization or the negative effects of globalization, by how these developing countries, they can, make into a regional blocks and can save themselves from the negative effects of globalization. And the third one could be resistance, which we can also call it the globalization from the bottom, right? We can also discuss that. And the last one would be, can globalization be managed in the interest of equity and sustainability, which is again a very important question. That globalization is a fact, right? It's a reality, and how to cope with this reality is again, or this challenge, how to cope with this challenge is another very important question, which we, the world needs to address properly. So let's go with the next slide of globalization. By the way, I won't mind if I can be interrupted by anyone, and we can further, be kind of an interactive session. We can do that as well. So let's start with globalization. There are different definitions of globalization. The one which I liked it's rather more simple. So is that, okay, before the definition, these are again these few questions, and which would make us, more easy for us.
Excuse me, Mr. Khan. This is Daisy speaking. Would you mind to make your presentation by clicking slideshow, so we can see your slide clearly. Yep.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you very much. Yep, thank you.
All right, okay. So let's address these questions, which would help us to understand globalization. First is that what exactly is globalization and what is driving it, right? Some would say that Christopher Columbus discovering America was also, a part of globalization, which is quite true. But the way right now is this globalization is what are actually those things which are, driving it so fast. Well, simply, I would say it is this technology, which has shrunk the whole world into a kind of a global village. So how that old globalization is different than the new civilization, well, simply just to make it more clear in the beginning, is because of this technology. We didn't have that much fastest technology before as we have now. So is it simply a new form of Western imperialism and global hegemony? Again, this is a very favorite question of radicals, right? They would always blame globalization as a tool of Western imperialism, and how the West can maintain its hegemony, the global hegemony, with the help of globalization. We would discuss that also. And then, to what extent does globalization create new winners and losers in the global economy, right? Because we have, and the transformationalists would discuss this, that we have actually new players. And these new players, by the way, is very interesting that they are mostly from the south, from the southern countries, right? Which a few years ago were quite poor. And I think Malaysia, Indonesia are example of that. And then how far is it transforming the pattern of North-South relation and the condition for sustainable national development? So this globalization have actually created new patterns of this North-South or core periphery, division. In development studies, I think maybe the North-South terminologies, maybe they are outdated now. And maybe we can come up with new terminologies of developing country or least developing countries. So this is also part of globalization. How, and third one is, how have developing countries and the world poorest people responded to globalization, right? They have responded it differently. We have new billionaires, from once poor countries, like for example India, Malaysia, and I'm sure in Indonesia as well, right? So these have actually, these poorest countries, how they have responded to globalization. And the last one is, can globalization be tamed? As I said earlier, a very important question to answer. Let's move on. Now, in simply, this picture maybe can give you an idea what globalization is in the, in the COVID-19 context, if you see. So here the whole world has, gone into putting masks. And just last year, things were normal. But this one virus, started from China, maybe, and it just spread throughout the world, right? There were also viruses and there were also pandemics, right? Even before COVID-19 in our history. But those pandemics have never, kind of spread that fastly as this COVID. So why and how? Because of globalization, right? So I've also mentioned for the audience of your country, Indonesia, the 1997 Asian financial crisis. If we look at this financial crisis of 1997, which your country had also badly been affected, right? Basically started from Thailand and then it spread through all Far East Asian countries and also globally. Well, different people may come up with different reasons, the causes of East Asian crisis. There are, different opinions about it. But if we just summarize it, right, and don't get into too much technicalities, right? So I think everyone would be agreed on it that it was because of globalization, right? And this one problem, financial crisis started from one country, and very soon, right, within a few weeks, or maybe days, right, it affected the other neighboring countries and then the whole world. So the point here is again that we live in very interesting times in which maybe one country's problem is not a country's personal problem, but it has become, or it becomes a global and a regional problem. So the Asian crash provoked a great debate about the benefits of unfettered global markets, the regulation of global finance, and the prospects for sustainable development in a globalized economy, right? Usually we humans, do not realize the problem, but when it comes, so only then we become, careful. So maybe that was a kind of a warning as well, right? The 1997 global crisis, code is another example of this, that these may be warnings. And the warnings, I believe that these warnings are actually that the world needs to get closer to each other, right? And the problems which we are facing is no more personal or national problems, but these problems are actually global problems. And we need to address it, collectively. If we do not address them collectively, I don't think so that any country is that much capable or powerful enough that it could deal, those issues single-handedly. So again, globalization. So globalization invites a fundamental question about how little say the poor people have against the forces of worldwide economic, political, and cultural interconnectedness. Again, a very important point. The role of poor people, not of states, the transformationalists, right, and up to some extent the radicals, they would highlight this issue that it's not only states, but we have new actors as well, and that are individual and pure individuals, right? Civil society and these groups, their say, right, is also very important while discussing, these issues of a global nature. So the poor people against the forces of worldwide economic, political, and cultural interconnectedness, over which they have little direct political control. Also, how effective is the national development strategies in the contemporary patterns of globalization, right? This maybe could be the negative side of globalization, that in which the national governments, right, they feel, helpless in this way, because Malaysia is one example. When this crisis started, Malaysia refused to accept the IMF package, right? And maybe later on it could have a kind of different consequences for that. But the point here which I'm trying to make it is that on many occasions, particularly socialist governments, right, they would want to follow their own national path of development, but because of those international or global forces would not let them, right, to adopt their own indigenous nationalist, strategies of development. So again, that maybe negative side of globalization. Let's move towards the next slide. The implications of globalization on inequalities and the prospects of development is the central theme of this lecture. That how globalization can, make implications or can increase inequalities and the prospects of development. So from globalization, can we achieve development? As I said, the ladders and, snakes. And or these globalization actually increases more inequalities, right? And I'll also share a few data or statistics with you, which are also interesting on one way we would see that maybe inequalities or poverty has been getting in control. And in case of particularly India and China, which has also, impacted on the global data of poverty. But on another side, if we see, though maybe poverty has been reduced, but what about inequalities, right? So you would see that inequalities has been actually increasing more, while poverty could be controlled, but it is again, a matter of great discussion. This is one example, this picture, if you see on the behind from this shanty town, you can see these skyscrapers, these apartments, right? But on another side, the same locality, the same city, you would see people living in, you know, these shanty towns in very poor conditions, full of diseases, right, and poverty and other social kinds of, you know, problems. And you would see these pictures, you know, in every country, whether these countries are developed or country of the north and also the country of the south, right? So this could be, again, one example of globalization or inequality, that on one side we maybe see that development is going on, but on another side we also see that these inequalities are also on its rise. Okay, let me admit. Right. So what is globalization again? The growing interdependence, this is the definition of globalization. The growing interdependence of the world's economies, cultures, and population. You need to know that it's not only economics, by the way. So all these interdependence brought about by cross-border exchange in goods and services, ideas, technology, flows of investment, people, and information, and all these things are part of globalization. Some people would define globalization as a double-edged sword. Uh, Again, threats and also opportunity, right? With that double-edged sword, you can protect yourself, right? And you can also, you know, put harm to yourself as well. So that needs to be, you know, regulated. It needs to be controlled and needs to be dealt very smartly, or otherwise the benefits would outweigh, you know, the problems. So it's a double-edged sword, globalization. But the unevenness of globalization compounds insecurity, since it's appeared that the strong are becoming stronger and the weak weaker, as the benefits of globalization accrue to a relatively small proportion of the world's population, whilst global poverty and social exclusion continue to increase, right? Many scholars, UNDP reports talk about this thing, right? That globalization has actually, you know, increased more insecurities, and poor people are becoming poorer while rich are becoming richer. And you can Google it out, and you would, you know, see these pie charts and these datas, which would talk about, you know, I think I've also included a few of them. I'll share them with you. But you would see that rich are becoming richer and poor are becoming poorer, which talks about the inequality. And here I have also included this recent World Bank, you know, statement in the context of COVID-19. So global poverty is expected to rise for the first time in 20 years. The COVID-19 pandemic threatens to push 88 million to 115 million people into extreme poverty in 2020, with the total rising to as many as 150 million by next year. So see, this one pandemic, right? And this one virus has so much, you know, badly, negatively affected the poor people. So what does it tell us? This also tells us that poor people are so vulnerable, right? That this one, we hope that by next year, you know, things would get normal, maybe a few, 2-3 years more, right? But these 2-3 years, right, would affect the poor people so badly, so negatively, that reaching that same point would again take maybe, you know, a decade or so. So again, somehow we can say that since the world is so much interconnected, you know, globalization, that one problem would negatively affect, you know, the poor people, the world global poor people, which are already very vulnerable. So let's move to the next slide. And I would be keep trying and keep looking at my, you know, watch, because we have a slide still there to at least cover them, all of them. So, of course, globalization involves much more than simply interconnectedness or a shrinking world, for it captures a sense that worldwide connectivity is very much a permanent or institutionalized feature of modern existence. We cannot get away with it, right? It would remain with us. So it is not simply an economic phenomenon, yes, but it is evident in all the key arenas of modern life: the economic, political, legal, cultural, military, and the ecological, right? So if you belong to the economic field, again, it's a challenge for you. Your culture may be also a compromise. Now, the new liberals would look at this development differently, and they may, welcome and appreciate. They would say that it's actually, not called culture compromise, but it's diversity, right? And so many other things. So it's actually deepening this enmeshment of societies. This is what globalization is, right? And the contemporary globalization, not the Columbus, globalization, which we also sometimes call it the Columbian exchange, right? Not that one, but the contemporary one, which we have this fastest and cheapest technology. So the contemporary globalization is a highly uneven process. It results in clear winners and losers, not just between countries, but within and across them. This is what I was referring, that you would see poor people in developed countries and also, of course, rich people, right, in poor countries as well. So it has affected, the people of the North, the so-called developed countries, and also the people of the South, so-called poor countries. So for the most affluent, it may very well entail a shrinking world. For example, the jet travel, global TV, and the World Wide Web, internet. But for the majority of the people, it tends to be associated with a profound sense of disempowerment, as their fate is sealed by deliberations and decision makings in chancelleries, in boardrooms and bureaucracy many thousands of miles away. They are actually referring towards World Bank, IMF, and up to some extent, the WTO as well, right? So decisions are making somewhere else, but the fate of, the people which would actually receive the brunt, right, of those decisions, they would be, people somewhere else, obviously poor people. Globalization has to be understood as a process which both unites and divides peoples and communities. Yes, a double-edged sword. But there is much evidence to suggest that globalization consequences are much less benign. Conceived as a process of creative destruction, globalization arguably engenders a more unruly world and a more unequal one. Now, if you see the literature of globalization, right, this one point you would see frequently coming, that people would say that, okay, globalization has, brought some maybe good thing, but at the end of the day, they always say that the consequences are less benign. They are malignant. They are more, negative rather than positive. And it's, some people would call it a creative destruction and an unruly world. If a powerful person, or if a powerful organization, or if a powerful country is not checked upon, right, then it would, do more exploitation. As the famous statement of Lord Atkins goes, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that same principle could be applied on globalization as well, that globalization may be, creating a world, an unruly world, and that whoever is in control of that unruly world would be in a better position, or in more, position where that organization can exploit, the more vulnerable countries, the poor countries. So again, UNDP, United Nations Development Program, is saying this thing, and they have agreed on it, that it's a creative destruction and unruly world, which is an international organization. Let's quickly go towards, as I said earlier, these three schools of thought. How do they see globalization? The neoliberals, the radicals, and the transformationalists. So, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm not good in with these slides. And Here it is, the neoliberal analysis. So for neoliberals, contempt is no longer a viable alternative development path. That this contemporary globalization, which is very much, it exists because of the market, and living in this world, the most powerful phenomenon could be market, because market controls our lives, our personal individual lives, and also our collective lives. And we think the way market makes us to think, right? And I believe that no person is completely, independent and free, but consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously, maybe we all are somehow, the victim of market. So the new liberals, right, they say that capitalism has triumphed across the globe such that there is no longer a viable alternative development path, that the only development path is that of the capitalist model of development, right? It's actually modernization theory, and those students of development studies, I'm sure, of social sciences, they know what modernization theory is, that the West would ask, the developing countries to follow us, to follow our footsteps, the way we, had achieved all this progress. You need to follow us. So in which capitalism is the only, system, and there is no alternative. Francis Fukuyama, The End of Time, it's the same thesis, right? That liberal democracy and capitalism is the only, kind of, you can say, experiment left, right, which we have utilized all options, and the only option left, the most viable one, is this liberal democracy and capitalism. So the new liberal right would advocate that kind of position. So for a successful development, single global market, free trade, capital mobility, global competition, etc. are needed, which are the components of capitalism, right? The new liberal school. So they would always, talk about single global market, laissez-faire economics like free trade, capital mobility. The capital should be, easily and freely mobile, right? And it could transfer to any place. And a healthy competition, healthy global competition, these are needed. Obviously, the radicals have a different position, which will be discussed later. So it promotes the vision, the new liberals, right? It promotes the vision of global market civilization, right? That they need to civilize the market, the global market. And civilize how? According to their own principles, according to their own rules, right? A reinforcement by the policies of IMF, World Bank, and G7, right? And the radicals would, object on this, and they would say that these are actually the agents, right? This IMF and World Bank, the agents of G7, the developed world, right? And with the help of these instruments and agents, they are actually trying to control over the whole global market. So also in the shape of structural adjustment policies, I am sure that Indonesia had also would have, accepted the structural adjustment policies back in 90s. The same happened in our country, right? And many other developing countries. Again, it's debatable. IMF and World Bank would always, would defend structural adjustment policies, but these policies also created, more problems, particularly unemployment, right, and inflation, and so many other problems, which till this day, after 2-3 decades, maybe these countries have not fully recovered. So the structural adjustment policies, at least up to the mid 1990s. We have different examples, and this, but I'll explain that later on. Again, the threats and opportunities. So new liberal policies reduce poverty in 50 years more than 500 years. The new liberals would come up with these, these statements like this, that they would say that, look, this is the data which we have, right? And these new liberal policies, because of this globalization, right, it has reduced poverty in last 50 years, right, more than the past 500 years. And it's a fact also, the UNDP 1997 reports and later reports also, second this view. But as I said earlier, that though it may have reduced poverty, but it may also have increased inequality as well, right? As I said, that poor are becoming poorer and rich are becoming more richer. So many third world are now the members of OECD, right? Organization of Economic Cooperation Development. So end of third world and growing global influence. Look at Brazil, look at India, look at your own country, and also Malaysia and South Africa, right? All these BRIC countries and China also. So in last 20, maybe, even 15 years or 20, 30, 25 years, right? 2, 3 decades, the third world countries are no more third world countries, right? And India, once known to be a very poor country, though poverty is still a problem in India, but it's the fifth largest economy, right? Far away than many, European countries. Then look at Brazil. I think Brazil is the seventh largest economy. So all these, right, have actually, developed and achieved this, a growth rate, a high growth rate. Bangladesh was a time that Bangladesh had an eighth, growth rate. India sixth growth rate. Even my country, Pakistan, once have also achieved sixth growth rate. Not now, but back in 90s. So the new liberals, if we advocate, right, their view, so we can also say, and we can say that the OECD, many countries, third world countries, have actually be part of now the OECD. New liberal policies, globalization open up the national economies to global market forces, thus limiting government intervention in the management of the economies, resulting in the erosion of national sovereignty and autonomy. Now, this is the criticism, right, done on new liberal policies, that IMF and World Bank policies, an example would be structural adjustment policies, which has actually, created more problems, and it has, compromised on national country sovereignty, right? So we have plenty of examples, and it has actually eroded, in the national sovereignty and autonomy. So whatever the IMF would tell you, you have to accept that package. My country is again going through the same process. Last year we accepted, IMF package, and this year again we would be expecting, another IMF package, and in which conditionalities would be attached with it. Let's move toward another. Now see, here is the answer, the radicals answer. Now, if some of you may be familiar with Batman and Robin, so Robin is actually asking for cultural diversity, right? These are those funny memes. And Batman is slapping him, right, on his face. And he's saying it's globalization, like it's the time of globalization, no more cultural diversity, right? And many traditional people would not happy with this sort of, understanding or this sort of development, right? Particularly Eastern countries, right? And I would say particularly Muslim Eastern countries, they would never, agree on any kind of compromise on their cultural values. But globalization is a much more, as I said, a reality, or a bitter reality, which you may not, have a kind of a, answer to it or a solution how to stop that. So here, this meme actually says that it's a time of globalization and no more cultural diversity. So let's quickly go through the radical analysis. The core and periphery, first world and third world remain a fundamental reality. The radicals, they say, well, the new liberals actually, they say that there is no more third world, remaining. Many third world countries have actually, achieved improvement and development, and some of them, they have also joined the OECD. So there is no more third world, right? There are many billionaires in India also, right? if you look at the global level. So how could then we call India, which has almost some 6 growth rate and the 5th largest economy, and there are also, you know, quite many billionaires in India. So how come and why should we call India a third world country, right? But the radicals, they say that no, the third world still remains, right? And the whole world is again divided into core and periphery, and the first world and the third world, and you know, so it's a reality. And the radicals would reject the new liberals, you know, argument, and they would say that no, these developed countries are still involved in exploitation, right? If you look at the global trade and you know, so many other things, if you look at their the cultural invasion, and the economic invasion, the political invasion, right? The social invasion in shape of their food, their culture, their you know, cinema, their liberal arts. So it's also a kind of invasion. And the radicals would say that this world still is, you know, divided into north and south, core and periphery. So the radicals further say that developing economies excluded from global affluence, thus deepening global inequalities, marginalization of third world economies as trade and investment flows among OECD. And they would come up with proper data, and you can find it out, that you would see that mostly global trade, it happens, right, among developed countries or OECD countries, right? Some people would call it G22 or G7, you can call them, right? So what about poor countries? Why have you excluded them, right? In the pretext of free trade, right? They are still marginalized and they are excluded. Their economies, right? These small countries' economies are not, you know, welcome in global economies, and they cannot sell their product, and they are not equal partners, right, of in this whole global trade system. And it's actually only, you know, a kind of an activity amongst these rich countries. And where are those poor countries stand? So the radicals have the same kind of, and I have given the references as well. Further, the radical says that globalization is nothing less than a new mode of Western imperialism, in which the multinational companies has come to replace military powers as the primary instrument of domination. Like a few centuries ago, when a country had you know, strong army, so that country would have, you know, be a dominant country, and could have you know, subdued the other smaller countries or less powerful countries. But now, since times have changed, and the multinational companies are those old, you know, military or military might. And since it's not that easy, right, to invade a country militarily, right, in a shape of military aggression, but you have different tools, and you have different armies, like for example multinational companies. And these multinational companies, when they intervene, and, or in other words, when they invade your country, so they completely take over the market, and your local companies, they may not survive, right? Because the technology which they have, or the capital or the resources which the multinational companies have, the local companies may not have, and they would not compete. So that free trade, right, would again go in the multinational companies, and this is one another way, right, of invasion. So the radicals would come up with these examples, and they have plenty of examples in which the multinational companies come, right, and they cannibalize, you know, they just, you know, destroy those local companies, and the local companies, right, they may not have that much, you know, capital, that much energy left, right, to compete with the international organization, international multinational companies. Here, with this figure, it also, you know, strengthens their argument. Half of the world population and two-thirds, which 67% approximately, of its governments are subject to the disciplines of IMF and World Bank policies. Right? What does that mean? I believe there are some 194 countries which are the members of United Nations, And in those countries, right, 67% of the global governments or global countries, you can say, they are members of IMF and World Bank. And if you become member of World Bank and IMF, then you have to follow their rules, right? And the packages, right, which they give, as I said, that they are, full of conditions, and those conditions are new liberal conditions, right? They may not, look at your interest, but they would look at their own global interest. And the new liberal policy, they would always encourage that the governments, right, must adopt those policies which are of new liberal in nature, right? With the failure of state socialism too, no alternative development path exists. This can also go as a kind of a criticism on radicals as well. That what about if then when radicals, when they say, and when they talk about new liberals, right, when they talk against capitalism, so do they have anything, in their hand, any alternative? If they say that yes, we had an alternative, the socialist, governments, but where are the socialist governments now, right? So many of the socialist governments have actually fallen. They may not, exist. So again, no alternative development path exists. Globalization thus reinforces historical patterns of dominance and dependence such that the possibilities for real development remain effectively blocked. This is evident in the growing polarization between rich and poor in the global economy. The radicals would again blame the new liberals, and they would say that globalization has actually reinforced the patterns of dominance. What was that patterns? The North and South, right? The rich, powerful country and the South countries, which were once their colonies, and they were, kept on exploiting. Like in Indonesia case, it was a Dutch colony, right? So this, which we sometimes call it post-colonialism, right? So new liberal policies, the radicals would say that they are actually encouraging, right, these post-colonialism, policies as well. The North, through its various mechanisms from NATO to the World Bank, resort to a kind of global right control to consolidate its power and secure its economic fortunes. As I said earlier, right, that radicals blame World Bank, IMF, WTO, right, FATF could be the new one. These are the tools of these powerful countries, right? So the radicals have a criticism on North in these powerful rich countries that NATO and World Bank are actually your mechanism how to control global right. Now we sometimes do see people protesting against WTO policies, IMF and World Bank policies, right? And many of these protests, quite surprisingly, you would see in these rich countries, in G7 countries, right? Because globalization has affected them as well. So you would see protest. So how to, kind of straighten them, these groups or these countries, with the help of NATO and with the help of World Bank. So World Bank is economic sanctions, right? And NATO is a direct military action, right? And we have examples of that in which North or the powerful countries have given very strong lessons, right? Iraq is one example of that. Afghanistan is another example of that, in which we saw, a direct aggression by NATO, and of course many other countries in which, with the help of World Bank, right, they have put on many, severe sanctions. North Korea, Iran, I think is a very good example, and Iran has been, completely isolated by the West or by the powerful countries, right? Because if I may have given a political example, but there are also examples, mostly the socialist countries, in which the IMF and World Bank have not facilitated them. Because if you look at IMF and World Bank, and if you go and study their structure, and also particularly the voting weightage, so it's very undemocratic, and it's very unjust. In IMF, I believe it's some 17%, voting power only reserved with America, with US, and I think some 20% in World Bank. And we also know that the World Bank president would always be American because it's written in their rules, and the managing director of IMF would be always a European, right?
Excuse me, you have 10 minutes to complete, Mr. Khan.
Okay, so I'll just quickly go the transformationalist. As I said, that it's a kind of an in between the radicals and the new liberals, right? And the transformationalists, they believe that the core periphery division is not suitable because we have new emerging social groups and new emerging individuals, right, from the south who are also rich, and there are also poor people, right, in the north, in powerful countries, in rich countries as well. And they say the transformation is that if we go to the core periphery phenomenon or division, it may not address those poor people in rich countries as well. So I would skip this one, the transformationalist, because we have to then conclude it. One world of development or many, again, different analysis, which I think I have somehow covered them as well. The end of the third world and the globalization of poverty. This is the same continuation of the transformationalist. They say that the third world is ended, right? Is finished now, and new groups or new individuals have been emerged, which I have also referred toward the billionaires in India, right? So as they said, that evidence also indicates that the growing poverty is no longer confined to the south, but is on the rise in the north, in the affluent north as well. So, and here you can see, this was the famous tweet made by Bill Gates, and it talks about, extreme poverty, demography, vaccination, basic education, literacy, child mortality. In all these things, the world have actually achieved. If I just quickly go to the extreme poverty, so in 1820, 94%, right, of global population were under extreme poverty. Now it is only 6%. Sorry, in 2015, it's now that 90% are not living in extreme poverty. So it means that things have been improved. But I need to add this one point here, that though poverty has been reduced, but as I said, inequality is also on its rise. So here is global poverty and how to decline this uneven globalization. Uh, Here is, you can see the inequality in rising or staying extremely high nearly everywhere. Inequality is rising. I said poverty is reducing, but inequality. So in 1980, here is the inequality. But in 2015, if you see, inequality is rising in everywhere, in Africa, in Brazil, in India, in all these countries. Growing polarization, these statistics will tell you that again, inequality is rising. And the third world to the global politics of sustainable development. This is again, the transformationists would say. They would say that the world is moving from the third worldism towards the global politics of sustainable development, right? So they may also give you a kind of a positive picture of globalization or in between that. And this, I think, is the last one, how to uh, control, right, or manage globalization. So with these three strategies, regulation, regionalism, and resistance. How to regulate WTO, and in the case of G77, Dr. Irfan, I'm sure you would know the Bandung conference by your president, Suharto Sukarno. And that was the time of this non-aligned movement, right? And this was the creation of G77, and it was a kind of a block, right, against this Western imperialism. So this is also in presently we can also somehow regulate globalization in the form of G77. And here you can see regionalization, the second point. And here, if you can see that list of regional organization, for example, ASEAN, African organization, NAFTA, and SARC organization, right? The Shanghai Cooperation. These are all these organization, regional organization, where we can also, properly address the challenge of globalization. And last one is, sorry, I'm running out of time, is this resisting globalization, which we call it globalization from below, right? From civil society, from individuals, right? They come on the surface, the international community, right? These NGOs, and in this way they can also somehow, save ourselves from the negative effects of globalization. This picture you can see yesterday and today. Maybe the new liberals would come up with example. Here, this mother is, telling her son, which is in the affluent country, rich country, that finish your dinner. There are more people in China and India who are starving. But nowadays, today, the same mother would tell her son that finish your homework. There are people in China and India who are starving for your job. Right? So I found it very funny and quite true. So this is the conclusion, which I think I've already made it, right? And these are the references. Thank you very much. I hope, I'm sorry, I may have missed many things, but time is always, short. If there is any question, anything, feel free.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. Very inspiring and thought-provoking presentations. Before I go to the question and answer session, let me give a very short review of this. So this presentation starts with questioning whether the growing of public globalization also grows inequality. And the answer is sure, yes, certainly. And how to overcome this. Before we come to the thought that overcome that Mr. Khan offered to us, we come to three dimensions of looking at this globalization. Number one is neoliberal schools. Number two is radical school, and the last one is transformational schools. Now, those three can really, with their specific characteristic, can gain that the globalization in terms of another name for colonializations without weapon. So, the richer can use WTO or World Bank or INF to regulate and colonize other, let's say, maybe rather extreme words, but then, that is the fact, can colonize certain countries. And there is no more deficient like the post-World War II to have blocks and separated by developing and developed countries. But then inequalities exist in every country, especially new emerging countries. And at the end of this, there are also three ways, perhaps, how to, let's say, quote unquote, control the globalization, because it is so massive and powerful. So that look at the economic crisis 1997, where most Southeast Asia countries, had on the assistance of IMF. Only Malaysia, I think, that reviews that, but with some circumstances and also the consequences. But then in the running years, 10, 15 years after that, Malaysia shows something differently with us. Yeah, we're still occupied by this global power, financial global power, But then Malaysia now have, you know, up and down fluctuated on the controlling itself, economic, regional economics. Now, the three strategies that Mr. Khan offered to us is that number one is the regulation. How can one country regulate itself to face the globalization? And then number two is the regularizations. This is like AFTA or Asian countries. They have something, you know, collections, a collective power or spirit within the regional countries to, you know, to protect themselves against this. Yeah, we have some trade agreement, perhaps cross-border agreements, things like that, just to protect the economic there. And the last one is the resistance. Sometimes we have to say no in some dimensions of globalism. We cannot just accept all of things running into our country. Yeah, I think most developing country really severe from that very you know, powerful engagement throughout all those political, economic, and also even cultural. Yeah, globalization really insists us to accept one culture, perhaps. We call it global culture. It seems like English. We know terms like global English now. So English doesn't belong to well, maybe 20, 30 years ago, we are, you know, familiar with the word. What English do you speak? American English or British English? Nowadays, there is no American, there is no Australian English. We call it globish, global English. This is, you know, the fact that emerges in the language as international communication. Thank you, Mr. Khan. Very nice. And let me go to the question here. Perhaps let me check the form. Okay. No more questions. Let me check the. Oh, there is no questions yet. All right, participant. If you have questions, you can raise your hand, or maybe you can type in the form provided in chat. We still have plenty of time. Yeah, Alhamdulillah, we have over 125 participants today. Wow. Yes, participants. If not, then let me proceed some issues to discuss. Yeah, Mr. Khan, how do you see after COVID-19? How do you see, in particular, COVID-19 is also become global problem? How do you see the spirit of you know, coming up together to overcome this quote unquote disaster? How do you see that in a global field?
Yeah, I think it's a good observation, good question, right? Because you know, there is always opportunities hidden in threats.
Ah.
So on one side, we can take this as a problem which has affected the whole world, right? But another side, we also see that this one pandemic or this one problem has actually made us more closer, right? And has made us more realize that this world is not only owned by one country, but owned by all of us. And if we do not do some precautions on time, it would affect all of us. So on one side, I mean, there was an approach of President Trump, right, which
Uh-huh.
accusing, you know, China of this pandemic. But there are also examples in which we would see that it's more a kind of a collaboration, you know, a more joint efforts. So tomorrow, if there comes another big challenge to it, right? So I believe that the world would be much more united. So we need to look at the, this shining light, in the cloud. We shouldn't be, pessimistic about it, but we need to be optimistic about it as well. And I believe that maybe in a year, by 2021, I hope and I pray that we would get rid of this COVID. And even if you look at in the past, in human history, humans had experienced much more larger, challenges than COVID-19, and the humans have somehow, overcome those problems. So I believe that on one side, it is a threat which has slowed down the global economy and have increased poverty, but we also see that is this COVID, this global challenge, would make countries more closer, and make into a more a kind of a closer global community.
Yeah, I think the rise of you know, awareness that just like a song, yeah, we live in the same world, yeah, under the sun. That might be a good idea of again questioning that there is no powerful country occupied other countries in
And
this world. Yeah.
Dr. Irfan, there's one another point, uh,
Uh-huh.
that maybe this COVID-19 is a kind of you know, uh, a sign for and an example for us that we humans should think about the way we are, involved in such a, massive level of exploitation
Yeah.
of our world, right?
Mm.
And I think this is the time that we humans should realize that the resources which are available, that needs to be respected, or otherwise, we may be going towards a complete, destruction of all humans. So I think the environmentalists would raise these issues, and they would say that we need to slow down. The whole this engine of global, of this world is running too fast, and it needs to get some rest.
Yeah, I think it's very natural, just like fasting, yeah, in
Yes, exactly.
Islam.
Very good example. Very good.
We are moving very hard. A lot of efforts, attempts we do to improve but we are, we forget to just take, rest for a while, yeah, to
And it
just
would
see
be
what we have done and
short
think about
term.
it. Yeah, very nice. Okay, well, let's see the correct link of this or not. Let me check again. Okay, let me check the other Google form here. All right. So, Mr. Khan, how about the time? What time now is in Pakistan?
It's 2:45 with me. It's 2:45.
Oh, 2:45. Yeah, it's still in the afternoon. Yeah, we are almost in the evening. We are almost reaching Maghrib time.
We are reaching Asr time, and we.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I think there is no more questions both in the. Oh, We have one here. Let me. Okay. There is a question from Rishi from UITM Malaysia. Is there any difference between the challenges of globalization before COVID-19 and now? Yeah. This is from Malaysia. Thank you.
Well, as the whole lecture was about, you know, the challenges and the opportunities. So I would again, you know, repeat it that it's a double-edged sword, globalization. Like on one side, this COVID-19, it spreads so fast throughout the world. But I believe if the cure is being discovered or invented, the vaccine, so that vaccine would also spread through fast. And if it is being, you know, successfully tested by anyone, any country or any, you know, organization, so I believe that would also be shared very quickly, because we cannot afford to save only ourselves and not let the country save, you know. So if you only think about yourself, that you cannot do that thing anymore. You live in a global village, right? So you are not in that position, even if you're very mean, you know, even if you think only about yourself. But thinking about your neighbor is also part of your own survival. So I think, and this is the time, right, that we need to go towards the global governance. This nation-state system. I need to add this point as well. They may not be, you know, directly relevant, but you know, still somehow relevant to the topic. Is that the world, right, or we humans, right, need to get rid of the nation-state system. Is not, you know, giving us any benefit anymore. It is, you know, making us more, you know, vulnerable to the global challenges. We need to move toward the global governance. We need to come up with the idea of one world, right? And maybe one global system as well. Because with this technology, right, and with these new realities, if we still continue with nation state system, it would lead us, you know, into complete destruction and chaos. So on one side, COVID-19 is not a problem of China, but it has become the problem of the whole world. So if the cure has been, you know, discovered, so it won't be only with one country, but it would definitely go to the whole world.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Khan. There is one question more from Betty. UITM also Malaysia. Assalamualaikum. Thank you for the insightful sharing. I have a question. Meanwhile, how globalization impact the society positively upon the development of industries and modern civilization? It also impact negatively, where percentage of poor increases. What are your thoughts regarding this statement?
Well, again, it depends on which school of thought you belong to. If you are a neoliberal, so you would say that poverty has been, you know, decreased. You would say that this cultural diversity is the beauty of the world, right? But if you are a radical, right, if you are a socialist, so then you may come up with that it is actually, you know, destroyed local cultures. And you would also say that, okay, if poverty has been reduced, right, but you need to look at that the inequality has also been increased. And then a few years back, they were less poor in rich countries, but now there are more poor in rich countries, right? So the inequality graph is going, you know, high. And one another, sometimes when we say that poverty has been, you know, controlled, so we need to look at particularly these two countries, China and India. It's because of these two countries. Both the countries, one has some 1.4 billion population, the other one has some 1.3 billion population. And in case of China, millions of people have, you know, because of their economic policies, have been taken out from, you know, poverty. So this poverty reduction can be seen only in two countries. But if we look at the sub-Saharan African countries, right, and some South Asian countries as well, right? Afghanistan, you would see that poverty has increased. Global poverty may have been reduced, but regional poverty, in case of Africa and a few more countries, it has actually increased. So I think these statistics are also dodging, right?
Mm.
If we exclude China and India, so then we would see that global poverty have also increased, so has this inequality increased.
Okay. There is another question from Sharika. UITM again, Malaysia. Thank you, Mr. Khan, for the sharing. I have one question. Can you explain a little bit whether two education systems involved in globalization? If it
Sorry, two education systems.
involved in globalization. If it
Sorry,
is involved, what is the role of the students to embrace the globalization?
sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't get it properly.
Okay, let me simplify. Do Does globalization also involve in education? Okay, if it is involved, what is the role of the students to embrace this globalization?
Well, again, see, as I said, that it's a bitter reality. And I have also mentioned this point that the globalization has compromised over national sovereignty. Those education system, right, which you also said, a global English. So it's actually that Western education system. That same goes about modernization, the Rostov 5 stages of development, and then the Westernization, and the Western culture, which talks about more, hard work and kind of, proper administration, which have their own rules. So yes, I believe that maybe getting into the trap of global Western education system and their education values as well, which may have compromised the 1,000 years old Eastern, knowledges, the local knowledges. Like, for example, in case of, we would say, Malaysia and Indonesia, if you look and go to these, I guess it's the Borno area, the jungles and those native people who are living there, and they may be adopted their simple life for 1,000 years, for hundreds of years. But if multinational goes there, so that multinational company would think of their own, modern view, and they may not look at and they may not appreciate those 100 years old culture. So yes, speaking, in terms of the globe, we can see that this Western global education system has very much compromised, the local knowledges, and those local knowledges are based on thousands and hundreds of years. So how come just, a new knowledge of hardly 200-300 years old can, defeat a 4 or 3,000 or 2,000 or 1,000 years old knowledge? So this is an issue which we need to look at as well.
Okay, there's one question from Maitya Shahrawi Musa. Assalamualaikum. I want to know about your opinion on the Great Reset. And the Great Reset means here perhaps the changing world that has been talked about recently. Thank you.
Sorry, which thing?
A great reset, perhaps the new normal habits facing COVID-19. How will you look at this as globalization's phenomena?
I think we already talked about this thing, that there are opportunities and threats related with this COVID-19. I personally am kind of more optimistic, right? That maybe next year or maybe 21, I think the world would have been, somehow dealt with this issue. So I myself is quite very optimistic.
All right, thank you, Mr. Khan. That's the last question we have on the chat. Thank you very much for your inspiring and thought-provoking
Thank you very much.
presentation as well as responses to participants here. Dear participant, join me to give a big applause to Mr. Khan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Irfan, and thank you very much, ITS. Thank you very much, the International Office, for inviting me and giving me this privilege, right? And thank you very much, students, right? And ITS colleagues, by listening to me and for your also your good questions, right? And I hope that we would be in contact, and I hope that I myself learn, things from you. So I hope that we would be in contact, and inshallah, when things get normal, right, we would like to build more kind of partnership and a kind of a links between ITS and the IM Sciences Institute. So thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Now I hand it in to Master of Ceremony. Thank you.
Assalamu
Alaikum salam. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan, for the excellent lecture today. And thank you also for Dr. Arfan for conducting this amazing session. Furthermore, we would like to present a certificate awarding to Mr. Khan as our speaker today, and also for Dr. Arfan as our moderator today. The first is Certificate of Appreciation for Mr. Khan.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Khan, for coming and willing to be a speaker today.
My pleasure.
And the second one is Certificate of Appreciation for Dr. Arfan as our moderator today. Thank you for taking the time to conduct this interactive session, Dr. Arfan.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Okay, before we end our lecture today, we invite you all participants as well as the honorable speaker and moderator to take a group photo. So for the participants, please open your camera. Okay, I will start to take a group photo and I will count in 1, 2, and 3, smile. Okay, and the next page, I will count in 1, 2, and 3, smile. Okay, maybe the last page, I will count in 1, 2, and 3, say cheese. Okay, we've taken a group photo. Then for the participants, kindly fill the feedback form at bit.ly/feedbackgls that you can see on the Zoom chat room too. And the deadline for filling the feedback form is today at 6 p.m. And we want to remind you, the participants who will get this stamp is the participants who come on time, join this event until the end, and also fill the feedback form. And also, we wanted to remind you that we have a GLS next week with a different topic. And of course, it will be an interesting lecture with the theme is Green Source Feed. So don't forget to join. Finally, we have reached the end of today's guest lecture series on SDGs, and we sincerely apologize for any mistakes we have made as a Master of Ceremony and also as a committee. Thank you very much for Mr. Khan, Dr. Arfan, and all participants for the attention and cooperation. We will see you in the next GLS. Good afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan, Dr. Arfan, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Mr.
Thank
Khan.
you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Salam. Hello. Hello. Mr. Khan, you still there? No. No.
So everyone, thank you so much for coming to today's GLS, and we are sorry if your question may not get answered from our speaker for today. Thank you so much, and hopefully we can see you again next week. Just a kind reminder that we will still have 2 GLS events for this semester, and on January in the winter break we also have another 3 lectures from our partners from Japan. If you have any question or anything you would like to say, just drop emails to international@its.ac.id to Miss Rainey or Miss Daisy. Thank you so much and see you next week. Permission to end the session. Bye.